Simo Häyhä sat on the porch of his small farmhouse, cleaning his rifle as the first snow of winter began to fall. At 33 years old, he was a quiet, unassuming man, barely 5 feet tall, with weathered hands from years of working the land. His neighbors knew him as a skilled hunter who could shoot a squirrel's eye from 150 meters, but nothing more remarkable than that. The radio crackled inside. His sister Aino called out, her voice trembling, "Simo! Come quickly." The announcement was grim. The Soviet Union had invaded Finland. Stalin demanded territorial concessions, and when Finland refused, he sent 450,000 troops across the border. Finland had only 180,000 soldiers, and most were farmers like Simo, called up from their fields and forests. Simo looked at his rifle, a Finnish M28-30, iron sights only, no scope. It was the same rifle he'd used to hunt elk and bear in these woods since he was. The Kola sector was a frozen nightmare. Temperatures plunged to -40 degrees Celsius. The endless Finnish forests, normally peaceful and beautiful, had become a white hell where men froze to death in their foxholes, where frostbite claimed fingers and toes faster than bullets claimed lives. Simo arrived at the front with his local unit, farmers, loggers, shop owners. They were given white camouflage smocks hastily sewn from bedsheets and told to hold the line against a Soviet force that outnumbered them 40-1. Captain Arne Utilainen, their commander, assessed his ragtag defenders with grim determination. "Gentlemen, we have no tanks, limited artillery, and barely enough ammunition. But we have something the Soviets don't. We know these forests, every tree, every hill, every frozen stream. This is our home, and we will make them pay for every meter in blood." That first night, Simo crawled into position on a small snow-covered ridge overlooking a forest trail. He'd chosen the spot carefully. Within 3 weeks, Simo's reputation spread like wildfire, not among the Finns, who simply saw him as another soldier doing his duty, but among the Soviets. Entire squads were found dead, each man shot once, precisely, efficiently. No wasted ammunition, no survivors to tell the tale of what had happened. Soviet commanders became obsessed with the phantom sniper. They sent their own snipers, trained professionals from the Red Army's elite sniper schools, to hunt him. They all died. Simo developed a routine that made him almost invisible. He operated alone, always at dawn or dusk, when the light played tricks on eyes. He never used the same position twice. He kept snow in his mouth so his breath wouldn't fog in the cold air and give away his location. He wore no insignia, no medals, nothing that would distinguish him from any other Finnish soldier. One morning, a Soviet sniper team of 3 men set up in a thick grove of pines, watching the approach Simo was known to frequent. They were professionals, patient, well-equipped with scoped Mosin Nagant rifles. They waited for 6 hours. By February, Simo's confirmed kill count exceeded 200. The Soviets were now calling him Belaya Smert, the White Death. Orders came down from Soviet High Command, find this sniper, kill him at any cost. They tried everything, counter-sniper teams of up to a dozen men, artillery bombardments of suspected positions, even airstrikes on sections of forest where he was rumored to operate. Nothing worked. Simo moved like smoke through the winter forest, always one step ahead, always invisible until the moment he fired. What the Soviets didn't understand was that Simo wasn't using tactics from any military manual. He was hunting them the same way he'd hunted wolves in these forests, with infinite patience, perfect knowledge of terrain, and an almost supernatural to read his prey's behavior. One particular incident became legendary among Finnish troops. A Soviet company, 120 men, was ordered to advance down a forest road. They knew the White Death operated in this area. They were cautious, scouts ahead, men watching every tree. Simo let them pass, all of them. He watched. Stalin himself was reportedly furious about the White Death. The propaganda value of this single Finnish farmer killing hundreds of Soviet soldiers was devastating to morale. Special orders came down. Elite counter-sniper units from Moscow were sent specifically to kill Simo Häyhä. Among them was Major Andrei Kovasa, considered one of the Red Army's finest marksmen. He brought a team of 12 expert snipers, all armed with the best-scoped rifles, all veterans of multiple campaigns. Their mission, eliminate the White Death. They studied every report, every pattern. They identified the sectors Simo most frequently operated in. They set up overlapping fields of fire, creating a web of death that no one could penetrate. For 3 days, Simo didn't appear. The Soviets grew confident. Perhaps he was afraid. Perhaps he'd moved sectors. Perhaps he was even dead from the random artillery that constantly pounded Finnish positions. On the 4th morning, as dawn broke over the frozen forest, Major Kovbasa was scanning the tree line through his scope when he saw something, just for a moment, a slight movement in a snowdrift 180 meters. Captain Juutilainen came to Simo with an unusual request. Soviet forces were massing for a major assault. Their command post had been identified, a fortified position 450 meters from Finnish lines. In that post was the Soviet colonel directing the offensive. "Can you take him?" Juutilainen asked. Simo studied the position through binoculars. 450 meters was extreme range for iron sights, especially in wind, especially in cold, that made metal contract and bullets fly differently. Most snipers wouldn't attempt it. Even with a scope, it would be difficult. "I can try," Simo said simply. He spent a full day preparing. He studied the wind patterns, watched how snow blew across the open ground between the lines. He calculated the drop of the bullet over that distance, factored in the cold, even considered the rotation of the earth. Minutiae that most snipers never thought about. At dawn on March 1st, as the Soviet colonel emerged from his bunker to observe his troops, Simo fired. The bullet traveled for almost a full second. It arced through the frozen air, dropping, drifting slightly with the wind. Soviet guards around the colonel saw him suddenly collapse, a neat hole in his temple. They heard the shot report a moment later, a distant crack that seemed to come from March 6, 1940, started like any other day for Simo. He crawled into position before dawn, his white camouflage making him invisible against the snow. His kill count now exceeded 500, a number so staggering that even Finnish command had trouble believing it. Each kill was confirmed by witnesses or recovered bodies, but still 500 men killed by a single rifle seemed impossible. The morning was quiet. Too quiet. Simo's hunter instincts prickled. Something was wrong. The Soviets had tried a new tactic. Realizing they couldn't outsnipe the White Death, they'd decided on a different approach. Saturation fire. They'd identified the general area where Simo operated and planned to simply destroy everything in it. At 0800 hours, Soviet artillery opened up with unprecedented fury. Shells rained down on the Finnish positions, trees exploded into splinters, snow vaporized into steam. The world became fire and shrapnel and deafening noise. At the field hospital, doctors worked frantically to save Simo's life. The wound was catastrophic, his jaw was shattered, his tongue partially destroyed, his face torn apart. In that era, before modern reconstructive surgery, such injuries were often fatal, if not from the wound itself, then from subsequent infection. Simo drifted in and out of consciousness for days. Fellow soldiers came to pay their respects, certain he would die. Captain Juutilainen sat by his bedside, holding the rifle that had killed over 500 Soviet soldiers. "You did enough, Simo," he whispered to the unconscious man. "More than enough. Rest now." The war was ending anyway. The Soviet Union, embarrassed by its inability to quickly conquer tiny Finland and having lost over 300,000 men to Finland's 70,000, agreed to a peace treaty. Finland would cede some territory, but it would remain independent. The only nation invaded by Stalin to maintain its sovereignty. On March 13, 1940, the day the Winter War officially ended, Simo Häyhä regained consciousness for the first time. Half his face was. Simo Häyhä spent the next year in hospitals as doctors reconstructed his face as best they could. The surgery was primitive by modern standards, but it saved his life. He would always bear the scars, his face asymmetrical, his speech difficult to understand. But he was alive. When he finally returned to his farm in 1941, he wanted nothing more than to return to his quiet life. He'd killed over 500 men with his rifle, confirmed kills, though the actual number was likely higher, and an estimated 200 more with a submachine gun, over 700 enemy soldiers total in just 100 days of combat. He was the deadliest sniper in recorded history. But Simo never spoke of it with pride. When asked about the war, he would simply say, "I did what had to be done to protect my home." He refused interviews, shunned publicity, and returned to farming and hunting. The rifle that had killed 500 men went back to shooting elk and bear for food. The Soviet Union tried to invade again in 1941 during the Continuation War. Finland called up its reserves. Simo, despite his injuries, reported for duty. But the military doctors took one look at his face and shook their heads. "You've done enough, Corporal Häyhä. Go home." So he did. He lived quietly on his farm, tending his land, hunting. As the decades passed, historians and military experts finally tracked down the mysterious White Death. By the 1990s, Simo was in his 90s, living in a veteran's home. His body was bent with age, his scarred face even more weathered, but his eyes, those hunter's eyes, remained sharp and clear. A young journalist finally convinced him to give a brief interview. "What do you think about when you remember the war?" she asked. Simo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough, the words slurred by his old injury. "I think about the cold, and about boys who should have been home with their families, dying in a forest far from home. Soviet boys, Finnish boys, all dying for, what, land, pride? But you're a hero. You saved Finland." Simo shook his head slowly. "I'm not a hero. I'm a farmer who knows how to shoot. The real heroes are the ones who didn't come home." "Do you regret it? The killing?" Another long silence. "I regret that it was necessary. But I would do it again. My sister, my neighbors, my land, they're worth defending. But I took no pleasure in it. Anyone who tells you they enjoyed war is either a liar or a psychopath." The journalist asked,